There are a lot of popular myths about trans people, from the ridiculous to the hopeful. There is the born in the wrong body trope, as though our real bodies are out there somewhere waiting for us to discover them. So, where are they? Are they wandering around with an equally dislocated inhabitant animating them? Are they in some mythic state like a limbo body storage unit with inept management? Now, I'm not disputing that the very real sense many trans and non-binary people about having been born in the wrong body. I'm just saying there are a lot of us who don't see ourselves that way. Another story that persists and is equally suspect is once I transition, all will be set right. I will reach a state of alignment and peace. Don't I wish? First of all, what defines transition and how do you know when you're done? Toss that out to a group of trans people for discussion and get as many answers as there are people. In my experience, the state of peace is a piece of fiction. I don't feel like there's an endpoint to be reached or a time I will say, I'm done transitioning. I began what we call medical transition 6 years ago. I had already gone to court to change my name, and I'd come out to everyone in my life, including my employer and my coworkers, asking them to use he, him pronouns when referring to me. For me, medical transition began when I started taking testosterone. Like others before me, I researched and read stories, I questioned friends and acquaintances, and I almost memorized a long list of possible impacts the hormone would have on my body, mind, and emotions. I remember being very excited about facial hair and body hair and my voice changes and what is euphemistically called bottom growth. Hint, it does not involve the hiney. In fact, my butt has shrunk significantly. There were things I was concerned about as well. Hair loss, increased chance of high blood pressure and cholesterol, a second round of acne to go with my second puberty, and the emotional surges as my body dealt with changing hormonal influence. The potential for going bald caused me the most concern. I really liked my head of hair, and I finally, in my 40s, had found a hairstyle I really liked, one that maximized my masculinity and was easy to maintain. And while there was a chance I wouldn't go thin on top, it was minuscule. All I had to do was look at my dad and his brother, the uncle we call Harry Jerry, to know what I was in for. Combs men don't so much experience hair loss as we experience a migration of head hair to other parts of our body. And still, I decided to go forward. I shrugged my shoulders and accepted my probable future as a balding, hairy guy. Here I am. What I hadn't considered and didn't expect was that dysphoria would come back well into transition. You've likely heard of dysphoria. It's that feeling that your body doesn't match your image of yourself. The term is mostly used in relation to trans and non-binary folks. The desire to transition is generally about aligning our physical selves more accurately with that mental image, the desire to look and feel right. So I want to pause in my story for a moment and dispel a notion that some people may have about transition. The idea that a series of medical, social, and legal changes and procedures can forever eliminate a person's sense of dysphoria. Not even going into the fact that many people who are trans and non-binary do not have the resources or the ability to transition the way they'd like. Transition is not a perfect and predictable process. The way hormone surgery and other changes impact us cannot be known ahead of time. You can't apply the hormone to places you want to change and leave the other parts untouched. And none of that takes into account the emotional changes and the time it takes to process them. I think that the emotional transition part is the part of the iceberg under the surface, much larger and more unmapped than the obvious outward changes. Some folks who undergo transition procedures may never feel entirely at home in their bodies. Transition is not magic. Okay, back to my story. There was a point, maybe the 4-year mark in my transition, when I started to feel some unease when I looked in the mirror or saw pictures of myself. I was having a hard time relating to what I saw. Yes, I had the beard and mustache I'd been wanting for so long. My body shape was changing in ways I found desirable. However, the way my face shape was changing left me feeling disoriented. I realized I was having another bout of dysphoria. I didn't fully recognize this newly remodeled face as belonging to me. It didn't look right. Or rather, it looked like it belonged to someone else. I spent a lot of time looking at pictures of my before face and feeling nostalgic. I wrestled with my feelings. Was I feeling regret? Or was this a natural sense of loss of the familiar? Was I grieving? What the heck was going on with me? After a lot of processing, I figured out some of what was going on. Even though I'd read that my face shape would change, or likely change, I still had been picturing myself with that face, plus facial hair, and more hair on my head. Instead, there was a stranger with a fuller, more square jaw and a much, much higher forehead, staring back at me from the mirror. I'd like to say I got over it quickly. I didn't. I wallowed in that state of dysphoria for more than a year, mostly keeping my thoughts and misgivings to myself. I was too embarrassed to admit that I was not 100% satisfied with my transition experience, especially considering the ways in which it had disrupted my whole life and the lives of the people around me. So I sat with it. Over time, I felt less and less disconcerted by my face, focusing on the exciting new frontier of beard and mustache styling. I confided in my sweetheart, who acknowledged that I had been very handsome as a butch dyke and was also handsome now as a trans guy. By degrees, I came to appreciate my new face and even accept my thinning scalp did not detract from my looks. The point of all this is to say, being trans is not a destination. Rather, it is an ongoing process as long as we are alive. Some of us have very well-defined goals and procedures to follow to meet those goals. Some of us are finding our way as we go. Some of us reach a state of rightness that satisfies us. Some of us will never entirely feel right in our bodies, the bodies we were born to, no matter how much we remodel them. We all have a different story. All trans and non-binary people have our own set of challenges, hope for outcomes, and senses of self, all of which are valid and powerful. There is no one right way to be trans or non-binary. Instead, there are an infinite number of ways to be absolutely ourselves. All of that is the beauty of being trans or non-binary. We acknowledge that we are the creators of ourselves, even if those selves don't have as much hair as we'd hoped for, and we couldn't stop our asses from shrinking 3 sizes. Thank you, and good evening.